Now is senior editor at The New Republic, Brian Beutler, and editorial director at the Huffington Post Media Group, Howard Fineman. Howard, how much can the Tea Party do? How much damage can the Tea Party do in 6 weeks, which is basically their operating time frame?
Oh, tons. Of course, nothing was going to happen on the Hill anyway, so
right.
you should start with that. But if it's possible to do less than nothing, and they will, and they may figure out a way how to do it. And I thought it was amusing and instructive that Congressman Chris Van Hollen didn't dare say anything at all nice about Kevin McCarthy, lest he ruin McCarthy's already, I think, shakier than people realize chances of winning this. And by the way, just in the last few hours, some of the Tea Party people like Michelle Bachmann and Steve King have said, let's not have the election next week. Let's put it off. Basically, let's give us, meaning the Tea Party people, more time to organize to defeat Kevin McCarthy and to defeat his candidate for whip as well. So we're just beginning here to watch the infighting and the lack of actual progress on anything. I think that's why the stock market went down more than 100 points today. I think they're looking at the fact that we're facing more budget crises, we're facing more deadlock, as I say, less than nothing between now and the elections in 2014.
Brian, in the opening to this segment, I read an email, or a fundraising email from George Demos that called Eric Cantor a liberal establishment politician. Why not just call him a Kenyan socialist or a Muslim while they're at it? I mean, it's like the attacks are no longer in any way based in reality. But I got to ask you, I mean, how much from outside of Washington, in terms of these other races like Thad Cochran in Mississippi, Lamar Alexander, as we mentioned, in Tennessee, and Pat Roberts in Kansas, it feels like the establishment is still pouring money into these races, and it will still be an uphill battle for the Tea Party to actually get their guys elected or pass the primaries.
Right. I think if there's one productive outcome, if you can call it that, it'll be that it'll allow these groups that are sort of kind of funding and supporting these candidates to raise yet more money. I think that the regret that they must all have is that this election happened so late in the primary process with some the big deal races that they hope to influence behind them. And with that being the case, I think that the actual electoral impact of this beyond Cantor's race is probably going to be pretty limited. And as Howard mentioned, there wasn't going to be much happening on the Hill anyway, so the legislative impact is going to be limited. If Kevin McCarthy gets the House Majority Leader position, the leadership impact will be limited. And so in the end, this whole thing might end up being a little bit of a bust, with one exception, which is that before the election, the House is going to have to fund the government again.
Which is a heavy lift for this House.
Well, if they're smart, they'll just kick the funding past the election for 6 weeks or whatever it is, and then deal with it once the results are in. But if the shakeup is severe, or if it leaves people with a lot of hurt feelings or the desire to kind of push the envelope, then you could see a sort of conflagration around the election that I know John Boehner would really like to avoid.
Yeah, Howard, how should Republican leadership play this? I mean, I actually thought it was bold for Eric Cantor to name a successor, if you will, yesterday in his press conference and say, I like Kevin McCarthy, because the way that the base has acted thus far is you tell them to take their vitamins, you tell them you want them to do something, and they do the very opposite.
Well, first of all, right now the phrase Republican leadership is a contradiction in terms.
Yeah, it's an oxymoron.
Yes, well, you already used Schadenfreude, so I didn't want to use oxymoron.
We're trying to keep the $5 words to a minimum today.
Yeah, so there isn't any leadership, and Speaker Boehner doesn't dare endorse anybody. First of all, he's weak. Secondly, it would be counterproductive, I think, were he to come out and say, I want Kevin McCarthy. He's being careful about it. Maybe McCarthy will win. I'm not sure. What is their strategy going to be? The Tea Party people may well have enough juice in the House to force a shutdown situation. And if you know these people, if you talk to them, if you're interviewing them in the hallways, you know that shutting the government down is what they want to do. Consistent with their theory of things. They're not here to make deals. And this is what Eric Cantor didn't understand. He thought he could play it both ways, insider and outsider. He was talking to these people. They don't want a deal. Every time he did something and offered a deal, they got more suspicious of him. So that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be through Election Day.
Yeah, Brian, the intra-party cannibalization, I think, at this particular moment, is what is most shocking to me. I mean, you forget that these guys are all ostensibly part of the same platform, the same tribe, if you will, given the level of vitriol that is being bandied back and forth.
Well, I think that one of the things that's kind of hard to map, what happened to Eric Cantor and that phenomenon, this sort of Tea Party versus establishment phenomenon, onto a leadership election, is that those elections are sort of won and lost on the basis of existing relationships and sort of financial quid pro quo and things like that. It's hard to say that Kevin McCarthy is unnatural fit for this, because a lot of those guys owe their seats to him. So you have a lot of rage and vitriol, but in the end, none of those guys have the juice that he has, and that's why I think he's sort of emerged as the natural successor to Cantor.
I hear an establishment pick coming from you, Brian Beutler. That's what I'm reading in your assessment.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Brian Beutler and Howard Fineman, thank you guys both for your time.
Thank you.
After the